Okay, John, we're going to have some fun today. And when we're done, you'll have a crystal clear picture of how you potentially can be financially independent, pulling out over $35,000 per year at the age of 65 to supplement your retirement. So this is awesome, right? Excellent. Now, the last time we left, I had two questions for you. The first question was if I can show you a plan that meets your needs in every way, that you're totally comfortable and happy with, is there any reason why we couldn't do business? And you felt good about that. Is that still the case? Okay, excellent. And if we do business and you were happy and with how we helped you, is there any reason that you wouldn't feel comfortable giving me maybe 4 or 5 people that you felt might like some help the same way that I'm going to help you? And you felt good about that as well. Is that still the case? Excellent. Okay. Well, as a little recap, remember last time we got together, we talked about the 2 key battles that you have to win the money game. The number 1 battle is the battle with inflation. And the second, of course, is the tax battle. Because it's not what you make, it's what you keep, right? Okay, excellent. Let's review quickly the Rule 72. Now, if you remember this here, the Rule of 72, in this example here, you're 29 years old, and you have $10,000. Now, based on the Rule of 72, at 4%, your money doubles every 18 years, right? Okay. At age 65, then, you'd have $40,000, right? You think that if you tripled the interest, that you would probably triple the money, but that's not how it works. That's not how it happens. Now, if you're able to get 12%, then your money's going to double every 6 years. So at age 65, you can see down here, you have $640,000 instead of $40,000, and that's amazing, isn't it? You see, 1 percentage point can mean tens of thousands of dollars, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of many years. So interest rate is really key. Well, if that's so important, where can we get interest that accumulates based on an upward movement of a stock market index, but where you can also have protection from any losses, where you're guaranteed not to lose any money when the market goes down? Remember last time we talked about the 3 general rules, 3 general areas in which strategies in which we can invest money. Let me pull that out for you. And we had talked about one's going to be the fixed approach, and of course, maybe 2 or 3%. Right now, it's like 1 or 2%, maybe less, which may be risky because of inflation. Now, do you feel this is the best vehicle to save for long term? No, it's not. That's correct. Now, the second here is the market. It's the other end of the spectrum. Direct investments in the market. We've talked about greater potential gains, but as you remember, you have total exposure to the downside risk. So you have exposure to loss in the market, the complete loss of your investment. Remember we talked about in your 401k how the investments in there can go up and they have gone down. Now the third option here is the index strategy. Now, where all your principal is saved and protected so you can't lose it in the market. Also, any interest that's earned is guaranteed against market loss and is linked to the S&P 500 stock index up to a cap. Now let's review a little bit because I think that this is the one that you had the most interest in, correct? Okay. The S&P stock market index is 500 of the largest companies in the U.S. and represents about 70% of the total domestic product. The U.S. equities capitalization, and that's the majority of the U.S. economy. But here's an interesting point. Now, I want to show you here the movement of the market. If you take a look at this chart here, the S&P, which is right here, the S&P has averaged over the last 25 years almost 10%. And that's pretty neat. I mean, if you and I had invested something 25 years ago and it averaged almost 10%, you'd be pretty happy now, wouldn't you? I would too, sure. So the index strategy works this way. All interest is credited, follows, and is linked with the S&P 500 on what it does, up to a cap, for example, 12%, but without any of the downside risk associated with investing directly in the stock market. So you see, if you benefit from the growth of the S&P and you're protected against any of the downside risk, then I'm going to draw this out for you. Let me give you an idea of how this works. Let's compare it with the stock market. Okay. So you are, and I'm going to have to write this and turn this back around for you. Now you are 49 and you got $500,000. Okay? So we got 49-year-old, 500,000. Okay. Now, and I want it to grow to $1 million. Okay? And this is 6 years ago. You're age 49, you got $500,000, you want it to grow to $1 million when you hit age 55. Okay. Now, thinking that if he could average 10 or higher over the next 5 to 6 years, you'd have $1 million. At that point, what he planned to do is live off the interest, pulling $60,000 to $80,000 off a year. Now his plans were to travel, have a lot of fun. In fact, he had his whole life planned out, and that's a good goal, isn't it? Well, 6 years have passed, and guess what? Guess how much he has in his account now? Believe it or not, he has about 43% less. Or in other words, he had 500,000. He's down 40. He's got 43% less, so he now has $285,000. He's emotionally bankrupt at this point. He was hoping for $1 million, and now he has about $215,000 less than when he started. Now, Matt, this must not happen to you. Why did he allow it to drop so much? Well, in 2003, if you recall, the Dow Jones was around 8,000. Okay? Now, it jumped as high as 10,000 in 2004. Okay? Then it jumps up to 13,900 right here in 2007. Okay? So it's doing great, right? Well, then what happened? Well, what happened was 2008. And in 2008, the market experienced what they call a correction and dropped and dropped. What were stockbrokers telling us to do? Stay in the market. It's all on paper. It'll come back up. Don't pull out. Now, many believed that the market would come back up, but the question is, when? So he decided to leave it there and ride it out. Then, as you know, came the mortgage debacle in 2009. So what happened to the Dow? It fell from 13.9 all the way down to 7,000. And he was completely devastated. In fact, he was not alone. I don't know if you know this or not, but recent cash investors worldwide have lost nearly $29 trillion. You've probably heard of Warren Buffett. He's touted as being one of the richest men in the world. And he says that it's not so much a rate of return on your money as much as it is a return of your money. Case in point, what do you think this client would choose to do now. Right, exactly. So, now $10,000 stock market versus the index strategy. Let's compare the stock market and the strategy with the index strategy so we can see the pros and cons of both. We talked a little bit about this last time, and I want to take it a couple of steps further. Well, I'll explain this to you. Okay, so let me get a fresh page here. Now let's say we're going to start with, I'm going to use some different colors so we can see. We've got the index strategy, and we've got the market. Okay, now we're going to start with $10,000, so we both have 10 grand. And let's say the first year the S&P grows by, we're going to have it grow by 10%. So, my index strategy and my stock market strategy are both the same. They go up by 10%. So now both of these strategies have in them $11,000. Okay. Now we're going to say, year 2, the S&P grows another 10%. So again, my index strategy goes up 10%. My market, it goes up 10%. So now what do we have? Well, now we have a total of $12,100. Okay? Okay. But let's say in year 3, the S&P drops 20%. And can that happen? Sure it can, and it has. The last few years we've gone through worse times than that. And now you have about $9,600. So I've had a decline. And now I am out at $9,600. If you invest directly in S&P 500, now you're thinking, oh man, I can't pull it out. It's got to come back. It's below what I put in. And that's what everybody was saying. Well, many believe it will too. It's just a matter of how long. Now in year 4, let's say it drops another 17%. Could it happen? You bet, and it has. Many stock market investments drop more than that. Now instead of having 9,600, you now have around 7,900. Okay? So the downside of the stock markets are you now have less than what you started with. And remember, this is going to be flat. We still have 12,100. So let me show you this. Okay, so you now have less than what you started with. It'll take 30% return to get back to your original $10,000. So that's no gain whatsoever now. But it's going to take you 30% to get back to the original principal that you put in here. And how likely is that to happen in 1 year? Not very. Even if you did get that 30% that you needed, it only brings it back to 10 grand. So you've lost 5 years, and you're ready to start it all over again. Now in year 3, when you lost 20% in the stock market, in the index strategy, your principal and interest were protected against market loss. So now instead of 9,600, you've got 12,100. You're still holding at the 12,100. Now when the market dropped another 17%, what happened? You held solid. You're still at $12,100. Now here's the $1 million question. Would you rather have $7,900 or $12,100? Big difference. Because when you lose principal, it becomes devastating. That's why Warren Buffett said that it's not so much the return on your money, but the return of your money. Because when you lose principal, it's devastating. You've got to get big-time results to bring it back to par. Now here's the downside of the index strategy. There is a cap, for example, 12%. But that's okay. let's say in year 5, the market grew by 15. Let me illustrate this for you. So, now the market grows by 15, you're only going to get 12. But you're getting 12 on more. You're getting 12 on 12,100. So, which is 1,450, which brings you up to 13,550. Okay? And the stock market, of course, gets 15% return. And you're back at 9,000. Okay. So again, would you rather have 13,550 or would you rather have 9,000? In fact, to dig yourself out of the hole and catch the index strategy, you'd have to get over a 70% rate of return in 1 year. And good luck with that. So you can see the difference. When you can lock in the principal and the interest you've earned, you don't have to have the huge return later on to make up for a lot of lost ground. Doesn't that make sense? Now, the index strategy makes sense for a lot of people because they want to avoid the market risk. Plus, have the possibility of a double-digit interest in some years. And that's exactly what happens with the S&P 500 over a long period of time. The S&P index has averaged almost 10% over the past 25 years. Now, using the index strategy is one of the best ways to win that rate of return battle. Now, with all this being said, do you think that an index strategy is a solve-all, be-all, do-all, and the only place you'll ever want to have your money? And the answer is no. But it is a really great place to contribute a monthly amount of money where you can get a decent rate without losing any money. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the tax battle. Because you just can't win the rate of return battle and forget about those taxes. There are 3 general ways that money is taxed as it grows and accumulates. And only 3. I'm going to illustrate this for you as well. Now we have taxable, we have tax deferred, and we have tax advantaged. Okay. Now, let's say that you've got $10,000 saved up, and in 1 year you get a 10% return. Okay, so we're talking about 10,000. I'm going to try to write this upside down. Never been good at it. Okay. Now you made $1,000, right? So here we made $1,000, but that's income, right? Taxable income. Yes, you made $1,000, but you've just lost up to $350 in taxes. You got your federal tax, your state tax, and we have local. So what you really made is $650. So not a good way to save long term. And you're definitely not winning the tax battle. And here's my point. Let me put this down here. So if I take the $350 out, you got $650 left. Okay. Did you really make 10? No. You really only made 6.5. So in this scenario, tax cost you 3.5%. Okay? Remember that even 1 point from our previous conversation, 1 point may be huge in the long run, in the long term. So tax deferred plans are like, they'd be like a 401k, 403b, or an IRA. Now, these numbers here, these aren't the place where you put your money. These are actually tax code. So tax code 401k says they're not actually vehicles. These are actually tax codes, and that determines how and when it will be taxed at a later date. These are types of what they call qualified arrangements, qualified plans. that allow you to presently to deduct contributions from your taxable income. Now there are a couple of positives and there are a few negatives to tax-deferred vehicles, so I'm going to cover them both. Number one, as your money grows, it grows tax-deferred. In other words, unlike over here, when you get your $1,000, it stays $1,000 interest. So now the $350 stays and earns interest. So you'll grow a lot more over here than you would over here. Okay? More here than over here. Number two, as you're saving money every month, in your savings bucket, it has historically been a pretty good bucket because you have the ability to use vehicles like mutual funds and index strategies for the monies. Okay, both have, and as we talked about, both have averaged almost 10% for the past 25 years. Of course, in the index strategy, as you recall, you also have the protection of your money and the protection of your interest and principal. Now, a potential positive is a match from your employer, where for every dollar you put in, they will match a percent of that up to a certain percentage. If it's a simple, it's usually 3%. Sometimes they'll go as high as 5%. It really depends on the employer and how the plan is set up. And that's free money. Take advantage of that up to the point where the match stops. If your match is 3, put 3% in, collect their free money, and then go from there. Okay, now, here's some of the downsides. Number one, when you start to pull the money out of this at retirement, what happens? It becomes taxable. Now let me ask you a very important question. In the next 15 to 20 years, do you think taxes are going to go up or are they going to go down? In the next 15, 20 years, yeah, they're probably going to go up. Let me illustrate this for you here. We talked about you have the mutual funds and you have the ability for the index, and those are great things, and there's also matching. Okay, now, I want to keep these, because now I'm going to talk about some of these downsides. They're probably going to go up. So we have several $1 trillion in debt. So what are people choosing to do with their money? Many choose to defer their taxes, but defer to what? Probably a higher rate. And it could be a lot more money because of potential growth. So it's taxed not only what you put in, but what it's grown to. But at retirement age, we also have lost most of our biggest write-offs. You have children. When you're 65, when you're 59 and a half, whatever age it is, do you think they're still going to live with you? You kind of hope not. Even if they are, there's not going to be deductions for you. Your house, will it be paid off? Probably will. Business expenses, probably gone. So the downside, the second downside is you can't take any money out until you're 59 and a half. If you do, there is a 10% penalty plus tax. So Congress has raised this age in the past, and they can do it again before you get there. And they might do that just simply to keep people paying into Social Security. There are a number of reasons why they might increase that from 59 and a half to, say, 65. We have a client who recently lost her job. She was making 6 figures, the same as you, and the company downsized. Her job was totally gone. Now, when she went back into the job market, the highest paying job she could find was $36,000. So she went from 125 down to 36. And she came to me and she said, you know, I can't make ends meet here while I'm trying to find a better job. And she had to withdraw money. She needed $10,000 from her IRA. So, you know, she wanted to pull $10,000 out. And so we did the paperwork, and I did the paperwork for $20,000. And she asked the question, well, why are we pulling out $20,000 when I only need $10,000? Now here's the facts of the matter. Whatever you pull out of this is going to be 100% taxable. That's number one. So you're going to pay income tax on the whole distribution. In addition to that, you also have to pay to the IRS an additional 10% penalty. In this case, an additional $2,000. So even though we withdrew $20,000, we figured we would net somewhere between 11 and 12. So we lost almost 50% of whatever came out of that. Now, tax advantage works this way. We have tax advantage here. And I'm going to make sure that I write this down so we remember this. 59 and a half. That's the minimum. That's how old you have to be right now to pull monies out. So, and in the scenario that I told you about, the $1 million, if I do pull that out, I've got $100,000 in penalty here. Now, if I were to pull the whole thing out. And we're not going to do that, though. So I want to talk a little bit about the tax advantage and how they work. Now, the number one positive is the money grows. It grows tax deferred, similar to an IRA or 401k. So, but unlike here because of that, there are only 3 practical ways that will allow you by law so that you can actually grow money without paying tax on it and accessing it tax-free. Now, the first is municipal bonds. Let me write these down for you. Muni bonds. You may have heard of them. Now, muni bonds are a form of government bonds, and the good news is that they generally grow completely tax-free, accessing tax-free interest. Why do you think these are not very popular? What's the downside? Right. The downside is a low rate of return, 2 to 5%, and 5% is if you take a long-term bond. Remember, there are 2 battles we have to win here. With bonds, you're definitely winning the tax battle, but you're not winning the rate of return battle. The second way is by using a Roth IRA. Now, Roth IRA. Now, Roth IRAs, the good news is they grow tax-free, and potentially you can pull them out tax-free as well. But the downsides are, number one, you are restricted on what you can contribute based on your age and income. If your income exceeds their limits, you can't contribute. Number two, you have to wait until you're 59 and a half to take out any of the growth. If you take it out before that, there's a 10% penalty plus tax. So it would be taxable and it would be a penalty. So let's assume that you want to retire prior to 59 and a half. You've got an issue there. Plus this is an IRA. So guess what? Guess who's in charge of all this? That's right, the government's in charge of all this. So we got the 59 and a half. Otherwise, there's 10% plus tax. Okay? Plus, this is an IRA, so, the government's in charge of this. Also, the plan must be in effect for at least 5 years before you pull money out. Okay? In order to qualify for money from the government for college or Medicaid or Medicare or Social Security medical benefits, you might have to spend down this account before you get any of those benefits. Okay? Now, the third and only way, so I'm going to put down our college, remember that. Pull out first. Okay, I'll flip this around so you can read this as we're going along. The third and only way to get tax advantaged monies is to use insurance. And you have to be careful when you do, because there's a couple of ways that might not be suitable for you. And I'll explain them so that you can be aware of them. Now, especially here in Western PA, one of the number one types of insurance is whole life policies. Have you ever heard of that? Okay. Now, the good news is that they grow tax deferred, and you can access it tax-free by borrowing money from it within limits. The downside is, again, like with the muni bonds, the growth in the cash value is often relatively low, usually 2 to 5%. So you win that tax battle, but not the inflation battle. The second kind is called variable life. So with this whole life, we're good on the tax, but we're not good on the inflation. Then we have variable life. Now, variable life, really popular back in the 90s, and with these plans, money goes into different sub-accounts. And these sub-accounts can be like stock market strategies, mutual funds, etc. You've got a potential growth of higher growth than the guaranteed rates, but you also have total exposure to the market and loss. Now, over the last 10 to 15 years, because of the downturns in the market, the net return on many of these has been about 3 to 6%. And I've seen some that were lower. Okay. Now, the strategy way is a totally different ballgame. Indexed universal life, where now you have the same positives working for you long term. Your interest earned is linked to the performance of the S&P 500 up to a cap, for example 12%, so you have the possibility of double-digit interest, and there are protections on premium put in and interest earns. You can also win the tax battle because you can pull money out without a taxable event, using a loan provision within allowed limits. It also gives you life insurance. So you've got 3 ways to choose from. Tax deferred, or tax advantage. I'm going to flip this around for you. So number 3 is index, UL. And we know the track record, we have an average 10%. And the tax grows, no tax, and we can pull money out tax-free with loans. Flip this around here. Okay, so now, based on what you see here, you've got 3 ways from which to choose: tax, tax deferred, or tax advantage. Putting money in an IUL on a monthly basis, which one do you feel would do the best for you? Great, excellent. Let me demonstrate how you can approach this. I think you can put a little bit in the tax position for your emergencies, like a savings account for short-term CD type thing. That's because it's liquid. Continue to put some in the 401k, especially up to the matching limits. And the rest of your available cash, I agree with you, should be in the index strategy, specifically an IUL. In fact, let me give you an interesting comparison between tax deferred and tax advantage. This will amaze you. Now, this is a hypothetical example. Let's say that we have never even met. We were exactly the same age, and let's say one of us is putting into a tax advantage plan like this IUL, and the other one of us is putting into their 401k. So we have the 401k and we have the IUL. Okay, now let's say we put our money in on a regular basis. Now we both have $1 million. Okay? Now you have yours in your 401k, like many people do. And me, I have mine in my IUL. And let's say they both gave us a 10% return that year. Now understand, I'm not saying that either the IUL or the 401k will give us a 10% return, but this is for the purpose of comparison. The 2 forms of tax standpoint. We could both live off of interest of $100,000 a year. But what's the difference? It's tax time. So we're both going to have, I'll try to write upside down for you, $100,000, we make 10%. Okay. So what's the difference? Well, yours is in a 401k, mine's in an IUL. We can both live off this $100,000, as I said, but now it's tax time for you. And the $1 million question is, what are taxes going to be will retire at 35. How about 52? Where France is right now. Is it going to be 35%? Is it going to be 52%? You're not really sure. So you're putting in money, but the IRS is calling all the shots. How do you feel about that? Let's say taxes don't go up. On your plan, there goes $35,000 potentially, and what you have to spend is $65,000. Now here, so you're going to end up losing $35,000 due to tax. So what you have left is $65,000. Now over here, I'm taking out $100,000 and I pay nothing. Now do you see how tax treatment of your money is a critical factor to your financial future? We both had the same million, both had the same interest rate, pulled out the same money, but what we ended up with was very different, wasn't it? So tax treatment is critical, isn't it? Definitely so. Okay. Now, as you can see here, my focus has been to educate, bring you options, find money, determine what you'd like to do with it, and you've indicated that you have an interest in IUL for the life insurance and a source to supplement your retirement and putting a little bit away in an emergency fund. What I want to do is review the monies that we have identified when I first began. This is from your financial needs analysis. Now, as we went through your financial needs analysis, it showed that you had a minimal amount, $8,000 in your 401k. You had, because you just started it, but you did have a tax refund, and you kind of surprised me with that. When I asked you what it was, you said between 11 and 13. I said 1,100 to 1,300, and you said no, 11,000 to 13,000. So we have, as I mentioned to you, how did you feel about giving the government a interest-free loan of $13,000 for a year, which you didn't feel very good about? So what I'm going to propose is that we take a portion of that tax refund. We're going to take some of it, we're going to put it into your fixed account to build you up a savings, and the rest we're going to, and the other 100 goes there, and we'll put $500 into the IUL, and we're going to grow that at interest. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you, let's make sure you're comfortable with this. So we have a total of about $600 per month we can put away for both the short term and the long term. Do you feel okay with that? Excellent. Let's take a look at where you feel it needs to go. Now, short term is 0 to 1 years. Money that you keep in either savings or money market account. I've recommended that we put $100 a month in there. How do you feel about that? So you're going to get a little better rate of return than just a blank checking account. Excellent. Okay, now as far as the other monies, the IUL, I'm going to recommend that we use Aviva Life and Annuity Company. Now the company, Aviva Life and Annuity, they are the #1 IUL insurance carrier in the U.S. And they have over 50% of the total U.S. IUL market. And let me show you why. I'm going to pull out the strengths and numbers brochure and go through this. I'm then going to pull out an example of my illustration. I'm going to go through my illustration and show the individual, the cash value, build up, any charges or fees that are associated with the policy, and what you can expect, potentially expect in the future as potential future income. In this case, his death benefit would be about $571,000. Now, the downside to this is you can't access any of your money that you contribute for the first 3 years. Can you live with that? Okay. There are surrender charges on this, as you can see, the difference in the cash value and the surrender value, and that the difference is the surrender charge. There are policy costs, and in the future, after surrender penalties have ended, you can only access about 90% of your account value tax-free. So you have to leave at least 10% in there. Can you live with that? And that's what's going to make it tax-free. Excellent. Okay, I'd rather leave 10% in there and let it earn interest rather than pay taxes on the whole thing anyway, right? Okay. Now you probably won't live to 110. Let me give you a realistic example. At age 85, 95. Age 85, 95, we can expect to pull out $35,000. You put away, let me get to that page here for you. There we go. Now you put away at age 85, you put away a little over $200,000. Oh, you put away $192,000 at age 85. Okay. At age 65, we began pulling out $35,928. So you've put in about $192,000, and you've taken out a little over $700,000 tax-free. At that point in time, your death benefit is $891,000. So we put away everything for that 20 years. We've taken out an enormous amount, 6 times what you put in. And then you die in a couple of weeks, your heirs are still going to have $891,000. So at this point, you've lived out your dreams. You've left a legacy behind for the family instead of a tax burden. And as I was putting together some of these ideas for this meeting, I thought of a few things that that might be important to you. What people in your situation really think about this. You've avoided market loss because your money was never in the market. You have the potential of double-digit interest in some years based on what the S&P 500 does. And again, the S&P index has averaged over almost 10% over the past 25 years. Your money grows tax deferred, as you can access it tax-free using the loan provisions. And if you need to, you can pull money out prior to age 59 and a half without income taxes or penalties on an available surrender value. And if you die, your family is taken care of because of the income tax-free benefit. Now, there is a gotcha here. And it's a big gotcha. And you're not going to like it. Aviva Life and Annuity Company is huge. As I told you, they have over 50% of the index UL market. And you have to qualify with them. And I can't guarantee your acceptance. You have to qualify in health because of the insurance. And let me tell you what, they are strict. So before I go any further, let me ask you, how healthy are you? I know that you run marathon and you bike, so I'm thinking you're pretty healthy. How healthy are you overall? Okay. When was the last time you were in the hospital with an overnight stay, and why? Okay, you haven't been. That's great. Are you now on any type of prescribed medications? So you're taking nothing but low-dose aspirin and vitamins. Excellent. Okay. This is what we're going to do. And again, there are no guarantees here. What we need to do is fill out an application. This is going to take a few minutes. We're going to fill this out. I'll then send it in. It's going to take maybe 4 to 8 weeks before we know if you're accepted. If you are accepted, by law, they have to send it back to me. We'll go over it. And then you can put a bunch of money into it up to the annual guideline limits. If you're not accepted, then it's all over, and we only have one shot per year to try to get you accepted. The reason I'm so blunt about this is that on occasion I have had clients that have gotten turned down. If you're turned down, don't get mad at me. We'll just go into plan B. If I get you approved on this one, this is what we really want to do. Well, let me tell you how the application works. You probably bought a car or something on credit. The bank will check your credit bureau, which is a history of your credit. Well, Aviva Life and Annuity Company doesn't care about your credit as much, but what they do care about and have access to is the Medical Information Bureau, MIB they call it, which is a history of medical records. They'll check what we put on here against what is on the MIB records. If it doesn't match, then we have some problems, and they'll probably, not approve this application. So as I go through these medical questions, if something comes up, stop me so we can write it down. Okay? Now here we go. We're going to fill out the application, and we're going to start checking these things off. I'm only going to mark the yes answers. I'm not going to mark the no answers. Any yes answers, we're going to have to explain what's going on. Okay? And now I'm going to do the application. Okay. Explain what I have to explain, etc. Okay, Matt. All I need now is a check to Randy Murphy for $6,000. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. What I do need is a check for your first month's premium. Now, if you're not accepted, they will send a check back to you. If you are accepted, this will count for your first month's premium, which probably won't be for 1 to 2 months, 4 to 8 weeks. But by submitting a check with the application, it does not bind the company to you or you to the company. If they don't want to accept you, they're going to send the check right back to you. So go ahead and write a check out to Aviva for $500 and write the second one to Randy Murphy for $5,500. No, I'm just kidding. Never want to write the check out to the agent. You always write it out to the insurance company. Okay, excellent. Fantastic. I'm going to take this, I'm going to submit this, and as soon as I hear anything, I'm going to let you know. You're going to be contacted by some parameds, a company called Paramed. They're going to come and check your blood pressure, et cetera, weigh you, ask you medical questions as well. Okay, fantastic. Great. Any questions? Give me a call. Otherwise, I'll be calling you just to follow up with you probably next week. Okay, thanks.